the digital payments platforms, it's changed completely the way.
Let me give you a little bit of a vignette of what that means. So in India today, you have per month close to 16,000 crore transactions that happen on the digital system. $280 billion worth. So the number of transactions are 16,000 crores. The dollar value is 280 billion, which means that on an annual basis, you're talking about upwards of $3.5 trillion. 46% of the world's digital transactions today happen in India. So when we talk about the fact that India is becoming a Vishwa Bandhu, this is one of the contributions that today we can make to the world. I was in Germany 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the digital capability of India. And countries like Germany, countries like Japan, we are way ahead of them in terms of transacting on a digital superhighway. And the UPI stack, our digital public infrastructure, during COVID days, our COVID application, even in countries like, in cities like New York City and in London, doctors were writing down on a piece of paper who's received a vaccine on which day to keep as your record. In India, on your phone, you were getting a digital certificate. That's where India has reached today. And that's our forte. And that's something we can take to the world. And that's where our soft power comes in as well. Because India does not grow at any other country's expense. India grows and makes the world grow with it.
Absolutely. But let me ask you, the telecom sector has seen a few hiccups and roadblocks in the past. Let's begin with, spectrum auctions. We remember the UPA days of the 2G spectrum scam, which was at one level a zero-sum theory, at another level it led to cancellation of licenses. We're back to a situation where you've come out of the auction regime, which was supposed to ensure transparency and maximization of government revenue. Is there a thought behind this? Are you not worried that the same charges of giving this on a discretionary basis will rise again? Because this time the man demanding it was Elon Musk. It's kosher to give auction without, spectrum without an auction.
So I'm glad you asked that question, and I think it's important that we understand the science behind spectrum, frequency, airwaves. So there's a very distinct difference between terrestrial networks and non-terrestrial networks. As far as terrestrial networks are concerned, when you're auctioning spectrum at a much lower frequency, that spectrum can be used by a single person, entity, corporation, or whatever. And therefore, that it is possible for you from an engineering standpoint and a physics standpoint to auction it. Because I can allot it to a Navika, or I can allot it to X or Y or Z, and no one else can use that frequency of that spectrum apart from you. When you get into satellite spectrum, so MEO, LEO, satellite spectrum, that spectrum is a shared spectrum. That spectrum at that height, at that level, cannot be allocated to a single person. So the question is, there is a scientific argument and then an economic argument. How can you auction something that is shared? You can only auction something that is committed to a certain individual. So satellite phones, for example, you have to point your antenna, and that's when you get the signal, and it keeps shifting. And so therefore that spectrum is shared, number one. Number two, if you look at across the world, every single country across the world, because of its physics principle, satellite spectrum is always administratively assigned. There is no country in the world which auctions satellite spectrum, because it's physically impossible to auction it. Third, this is something that has been debated ad nauseum and has been passed by Parliament. The Telecom Act that was passed in November of last year very clearly in its first schedule says, because of these very reasons, that satellite spectrum will be administratively allocated. Now, that's the regulatory process. Now you bring in the economic argument. How will you administratively allocate it? That pricing is not going to be on a FIFO basis. First in, first out, first come, first served, none of this stuff. It's going to be decided by the Telecom Regulatory Authority. We have a TRAI, we have a regulatory authority that assigns a price for that spectrum. That authority will assign that price. And based on that, the spectrum will be assigned to everyone that procures a license. We have today 2 parties that have a license in India. We have OneWeb or Bharti, and we have Reliance that have a satellite license. So whoever comes in, and India's doors are open for everyone, and complies with the requirements of the license, will certainly be given a license, and then separately be given the spectrum at the TRAI decided price, which TRAI will, in its best judgment, come to a conclusion on.
But Indian companies were opposed